Awesome. Few notes from Danielle.
All right, so let's listen up, please. All right, good day to all of you. I have a couple of announcements, just two. One, we have a round table today. Please make sure you attend 4 p.m. in the barrel room. The second announcement has to do with our field trip. It's scheduled for this Saturday. For those of you who are planning to go, you need to go and purchase your ticket at the box office in the Student Center. We're leaving at 9 a.m. Very, very important. We're not leaving at 9:30. 9 a.m. in front of the police station. Bring water, comfortable shoes. We will be providing you with lunch. And the hike that we're going to be doing is not very long. So I'm thinking around half a mile, 3/4 of a mile. All right? So it's not this very, very long hike. We will be back around 2:30, 3 p.m. All right? So again, don't forget, 9 a.m. outside of the police station. Thank you.
Also wanted to explain something we're going to start doing with today's lecture, which is you're going to be passed out little note cards during this lecture. And what we would like you to do, so you have them already, I see in front of you. Okay, good. Good. Awesome. What we want you to do is, as you're listening to the lecture, we want you to write down questions you think might be interesting that pertain to what today's speaker is having to say about it. And then before the end of the speech, you will have those cards picked up. I think that your mentors are going to be gathering them up and bringing them up and using some of those questions for the last 10 minutes of the period. Okay, everybody understand that? All right, that said, I'd like to introduce today's speaker. He's usually the one introducing speakers, but today we get to put him in the spotlight. Dr. Scott Miller, the floor is yours.
So what I'll do is at 12:35, I'll just say, write your questions or finish writing your questions, and then 2 of your peer mentors are going to grab them, and then we'll do that, and then I'll talk for about 5 more minutes or 10 more minutes, and then we'll go from there. Hi. It's a privilege and a pleasure to be here today. Today, I have the interesting and fun and a privilege of starting our new unit on identity narrowly. Okay, so we've been talking about identity for the last 3 lectures, but in many ways, those first 3 lectures form a unit about the questions of identity in college, or who you are as a college student, what education in college means, and so forth. Now we're shifting into one of 2 units that are both driven by the reading of a particular novel about much broader, and I don't know, maybe sort of more full life, impactful questions of what identity means. And so we're getting into this right away with this book we're reading called Into the Forest. My title is Identity and Apocalypse, Into the Forest and the Existential Dilemma. It has been so interesting to me to watch during my lifetime the growth in popularity of this genre called apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic literature. You see some texts you're probably very familiar with. I've used, for instance, Hunger Games in my sections in FYE. It's a great text for talking about identity and social global issues. And I've always kind of wondered, what is it about this kind of literature that makes it popular to us right now in history? It's been growing in popularity, I'd say, through the 20th century, but right now it's got a lot of traction. Here's some texts that you might be familiar with. And just a teaser about that if you should, I think by now, have gotten into about the first 60 or 70 pages of Into the Forest, and you probably know by now pretty much what this little blurb says, but this is just to provide a little bit of corroboration that this is one of these post-apocalyptic narratives. 2 young women, Eva and Nell, are left orphaned in their family home in the Sonoma County woods. That, of course, is not a coincidence that we chose the book for that purpose. By the way, the location, I don't know, Danny, are you here? Is Gene Hagelin close to the fire, do you know? Not too close. That's good, because from your descriptions, I was afraid that she might actually live really close. She can tell us about that, but pardon? Not in danger. That's good. I'm so glad to hear that. So these are two girls who live in this house in the Sonoma County woods. Outside, they live like a distance from civilization, which is like Healdsburg. Civilization has fallen apart, but they continue to pursue their regular lives. And that means, for instance, pursuing her ballet practice for Eva and preparing for college. She wants to go to Harvard for Nell. So these are young people in your general category, age range, and so forth. And they assume that everything's going to start up again, or at least they hope. They're going under, continuing to live their lives under that expectation and hope. And their food supplies begin to fall short. Their home begins to deteriorate. They face more and more challenging choices as it becomes clear that things aren't going to start up anytime soon. That's not I'm going to try not to do any spoilers today, but I can tell you enough to know that it doesn't get better. in terms of the situation out in the world. So my question is, like, why are we today so interested in this form of literature? Here's my first hypothesis. We are interested in apocalypse narratives because we are profoundly curious about questions of identity. Who are we? And what are we? I am inviting you today to go into your reading of this book with these questions foremost in your mind and make them very personal. Who are you? And what are you? In ways that you'll see as we go. Now, I think that these questions are profoundly important to us right now precisely because we live in so complicated a world where we can live out so many different roles in our lives. We have so many different options available to us in a world that has become so intertwined and so complicated. So here's me. Here's a little snapshot of my identity or my identities. I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm a daddy, so that's all kind of familial. I'm an English professor, as you can see, that's my professional identity. Either my civic identity is like taxpayer and voter, personal identities like heterosexual, class identities like upper middle class, white male, that situates me in certain ways. I have identities that I ascribe to proudly, like I'm a watercolorist, I love to paint. I'm a consumer, when I go to the mall, just like all you guys do, or Target or whatever. I'm a member of a church. So these are all the things that I have available to me, and it puts me into all these different roles which are variously comfortable, and I have to adapt every day 1,000 times as I step into and out of these different roles, which creates a crisis in some ways, or at least I think what I would say is that many people, as this complexity of life has grown, have faced a crisis of identity that is oftentimes referred to as the existential or the modernist crisis. Because you can do all that stuff, bounce in and out of these different roles, and you can always have present in your question, well, who am I really? Who am I really, right, amid all that? Are they just all these roles I play, are those me? Or is there something deeper, something more profound, something more, well, we'll get to it. Apocalyptic literature, post-apocalyptic literature helps. I think it's interesting to us because it offers to us the promise that we might be able to answer that question of who am I really by showing us through these horrible, experiences that people have to go to, like which part of those characters endures the longest or is eternal. I mean, even if you want to go mystical with it. Which part lasts to support them in the darkest times? Which part is most healthy not only for themselves, but for the rest of the world as well? Which part of them was the part that contributed to the apocalypse in the first place, right? Which part is in balance with the rest of creation versus out of balance? I think oftentimes in this huge mix of identities that we live out, we oftentimes feel out of balance, like literally kind of off balance, right? Well, yeah, and which part is incorruptible? Which part is the part that can't be touched by all that corrupting social influence that we feel sometimes is this malevolent force? which part, to put it simply, is really, 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 really real, as opposed to all those roles that we play. I think this literature holds out the possibility, the hope, that there is a part that's really, really, really real. And by the way, not all philosophers would agree that there is. There are a lot of philosophers who would say, no, it's actually all just those roles you play, and you can never really get down to any nub, because there isn't really a nub. Mystical philosophers would say, yes, there is a core, an essence, a soul. And you get to decide that for yourselves. But all these apocalyptic narrative writers are interested in that question and are giving you various possible answers to the question. So there's my second hypothesis. The answer is about what remains after the apocalypse, okay? Inside of you, I mean. Follow the ideas and ideologies of the authors, right? It's Gene Heglin's ideas about what society is and what individual identity is that I want you to be interested in. I think you teachers want you to be interested in. And so you can see them, so you can decide for yourselves which are the ideas you like. So the answers can be optimistic or pessimistic or spiritual or material or personal or universal, etc. So there's all kinds of ways that a writer might answer the question. They will probably always be political, meaning every single answer that is offered by this form of literature has implications for our wider society and political arrangements. But that's something you can get into as you discuss the novel in your sections. All right, where am I now? Okay, I want to share with you a story of my own. Yeah, thanks, Hallie. Of my own about going into the forest. This is partly just to give you my cred, all right? That I kind of know what's going on in this book, and to give you some of my own personal examples as an example, not to say that this is the way you should be thinking about it, but also to challenge you, as you'll see, in ways that will become clear. When I was 39 years old, which is well over, not well over, but over 10 years ago now, I had an existential crisis, and I've had a number since then, and sure I'll have a number, the rest of my life. These things come up. It's good if they do. That challenges you to grow, right? But I was 39, right? And that's a profound moment, to be 39, almost 40, almost truly middle-aged. And I had sort of come here to Sonoma State. I'd done most of what I wanted to do or thought, I'd succeeded in the job that I came to do, which I'm still doing, by the way. I'm director of the writing center. I made this writing center, and I still love it. But I'd done it, And then I'd also gotten divorced from my first marriage a few years before that, and I'd had a couple of catastrophic love affairs after that. So some of it was about my own stuff, as a partner. And so I thought, I want to do something dramatic, I want to test myself. So a friend of mine said, hey, my family and I are going to go on a big, long backpacking trip. And I said, hey, that sounds like fun. And I'd been a backpacker when I was younger, but I hadn't backpacked in a long time. This is me at the end of the trip, and I'm going to come back to this image in a second. It really is the hottest I've ever been, by the way. Or ever will be, I'm sure. I'm just going to tell you the story of the adventure to begin with. And then I'm going to tease out some implications of it for issues of identity. Okay. So here, the whole trip was 10 days long, and I walked with these people and a few others who had left before that to a place called Lake of the Lone Indian, where I stayed for 5 days. 2 of those days were with these people, then they left, and I was all by myself, and I was alone in the high Sierra wilderness for 5 days. It was my first experience of being alone in the wilderness, in the forest, as it were, for that long. I've had other experiences since then. So all those people, I'm on the left, obviously. All those people left, and then I was left alone. We got there by walking over this pass called McGee Pass, which is, if you're interested, if you're a backpacker yourself, it's way in the, you get to it through the eastern Sierra. It's southwest of Yosemite. And it's very high. It's a 12,000-foot pass. And getting there was incredibly difficult for me. Not only was I kind of out of shape, but my pack weighed about 60 pounds, which is huge. a lot. And my friends that I was with were devotees of this like new style of backpacking called ultralight backpacking. Their packs were like 20 pounds. And they had all this really high-tech gear and stuff. So they sort of raced over the summit. Well, it was just killing myself. And it was very an encounter with mortality in a sense too, because, well, not only was I really feeling an extreme level of exhaustion and tiredness and weariness and confronting the limitations of my body, I also would come upon, the trail would come upon this, would be walking along this 45-degree angle with a snow field 1,000 feet down below me, and then there would be a snow, like a glacier crossing the path, and you'd have to walk over the snow, thinking all the way along, oh, I could die right down there really easy. So it was a real a confrontation of my body and my mortality and so forth, just even as I was doing it. But I made it over. And I got to this place called Lake of the Lone Indian, which is about 10,000 feet. It's in the John Muir Wilderness, in case you're a backpacker. Very high, very remote. There were a couple of days when I didn't see a single other human being the whole day. This was right after my friends departed. There I am, just kind of like, here I am. It was unbelievably difficult. I'll start with that. To be alone in the wilderness. How many of you, have any of you had solo wilderness adventures of any way? So a few of you. So you might know just what a jolt it is to suddenly be alone with nobody close to you. It is just existentially very, very challenging to do. I don't really understand how monks and so forth can do it. I certainly couldn't do it for very long. And what I did, I freely admit, is a pretty mild version. There are people who walk the whole Pacific Crest Trail all by themselves for like 6 months and stuff. That's way beyond me. Anyway, so I was there, and there's my beautiful lake. And in addition to the difficulty, it was also incredibly powerful in terms of giving me a very heightened experience of being alive. I don't know, those of you who've had those wilderness adventures probably know what I'm like. Every sense, sight, hearing, smell, just roared up and was highly, highly, fine-tuned. I heard every bird. I was aware of every change in the wind temperature and the clouds and so forth. My sight, I was just looking at everything. In fact, I kind of knew, I reflected at one point that, hey, here it is sunset, and I've really been awake and alive this whole day. I know exactly how long this day was because I didn't miss a minute of it. I don't know, it's a very strange experience to have that heightened sense. Now, it's an incredibly wonderful experience because you get to see the beauty of the world that is all around you all the time that you always forget about. I bet all of you have experience of like, wow, how long has it been since I've seen a sunset like that? Or, this was that in, like on steroids. It was a really, really rich experience of that. So there's my lake. My camp, you can see my tent was right there. I spent a lot of time just sitting on that rock over the lake, watching the breeze riffle the lake. And it was just so amazing because the shapes, the patterns on the lake were never the same from one minute to the other, and it just infinitely changed. And it was like watching the best TV show, only 10 times better. So I had an experience of awakening to the natural world, and I know what it's like to go to the forest and have that awakening. Oops, what am I doing here? Oops, there I am. Okay, and I did a lot of walking around the lake. This is kind of going up higher on one of the passes around there. My lake is down over that lip. You can see how high it is. It's true high Sierra. I was very attentive to everything around me. Dead trees are incredibly beautiful. The bones of trees after they've died are spectacularly beautiful. And I just photographed stuff like that. Same with flowers. The place was just crazy with flowers. And I'd seen flowers before, but now suddenly I was seeing flowers. They were infinite in their diversity, infinite in their beauty, and I was suddenly awake to them. Right? Also, changes in the weather. So another thing that scared the hell out of me was weather. If you know the mountains at all, you know that mountains create their own weather. Right? So oftentimes at these high elevations, monsoonal rains can build up, but these big clouds can build up, and you can get poured on and washed away, you know. And of course, if your stuff gets wet and it gets cold, you're screwed, to put it bluntly. So I was very sensitive. So and I watched the clouds a great deal, again, with that heightened sensitivity. And I watched, you know, endless sunsets. Like here's one, you know, it sort of got beautiful, and it got beautifuler, and then it got most beautifulest. And if you've never seen a Sierra sunset, please do, you know, at some point in your life, go up to the mountains and see the beauty that is just there, you know, free for the giving. More beautiful than anything that is available to you. I don't know, in my normal life. I'll talk about myself. That's my lake. On the other side of the lake was my camp. All right, so I'm just moving along here. After 3 days all by myself at this lake, I walked out of the wilderness in 2 days. This is a valley, sort of still southwest of Yosemite, called Cascade Valley, I think. And I walked all the way down this valley and then up over this lip to walk out of this place called Meadow. This, by the way, just again for you mountaineers, there are valleys almost as beautiful as Yosemite Valley. And I think Yosemite Valley is distinctively beautiful, but there are valleys very close, you know, that you just walk to a little ways, and they're almost as beautiful, and nobody's there. Just tip there. And that's the last picture I took on the trip. I'm at this campsite called Meadow, where I was waiting to find a ride to get to my car on the other side of the Sierras, and this beautiful, again, gorgeous clouds blew up. All right, that's my story. Okay, I'm going to come back to it in a little bit and sort of pull out some significances for you as you read Into the Forest, okay? Let's go back to our hypothesis. Apocalypse narratives take us out of the structures and institutions of civilization and into the forest, metaphorically, right? Yeah, as you read the book, think about what into the forest means. Like, you know, that's the title of the book. You should be thinking, all right, that's a metaphor. You know, it's there are significations to what she means by the forest that are much bigger than just, you know, trees. Apocalypse narratives take us out of the structures and institutions of civilization and into the forest of ourselves. So it's an internal forest to open up, explain, and evaluate the various forces that make up our identities. As society dissolves in these apocalypse narratives, we find out who we are again. That's the hope of them. That's the promise of them, I think. And we find out what society was, too. You find out what was in you, and you find out what was in society, and you can put it out there and look at it. I should also say, by the way, it's also possible that we could be fascinated by apocalypse narrative because the apocalypse is shortly to come, and we're trying to figure out how to be ready for it. I hope that's not the case, but this, I think, is a better theory. Just a very brief shout out to history, okay? I am, and these apocalyptic narrative writers are very much not the first people to go into the forest and look for the questions about what human identity is. And here's 3 people that you might know about who could be said to have gone into the wilderness to find themselves and figure out what their values are and so forth. Henry David Thoreau, who wrote that great book called Walden, and you know is a very important figure in American philosophy and thought. John Muir, who founded the Sierra Club and was a great exponent for wilderness preservation, was one of the driving forces behind the creation of the national parks. Jesus of Nazareth could be thought of as somebody who also did this journey out into the wilderness to come back with wisdom. And I think that's really the promise of this literature. It's not just the going forth, it's also the coming back to share that wisdom with the world. Anyway, that's just a sort of a, I don't know, parent parenthesis, I guess. So I want to give you some tools that are going to be very useful to you in your sections as you go about thinking about the questions of identity for yourselves and identity within a social situation and what society is. So these are some terms that you can keep coming back to. As I said, part of my job here is just to get you ready for conversations that you're going to be having about Into the Forest. And these terms, I bet you, your professors are going to be excited to use or to see you use. So one term that's often used a pair of terms that are oftentimes used in sociological studies in particular are these terms, structure and agency. Okay, so by structure, when a sociologist talks about structure, they are talking about all the stuff outside of you. You were born into a world which structures you. So it's outside of you, but it profoundly impacts you, which positions you. It puts you into positions, given your race, your class, your gender, etc. These are the societal givens of your identity. They are how society interprets you and positions you based on its values and arrangements. Okay? Structural elements of your identity come from society, reflect society, embody society's values, respond to society's decrees. You cannot change them because they are about who you are how you are involved in society, but you can shift your positioning by shifting into different roles through passing. That's a term that might come up in your sections, or adaptation. You are right now, as college students, attempting to change your structural positioning within society by becoming college-educated people who can then go forth and become, I presume, professional workers and so forth. That is your work to change your structure through acts of agency, which is everything that's in you. Everything, it's the energy and will that you have to create some give within the givens outside of you. Ways that your own energy, passion, work, creativity, interests, etc., can help to create a special you. Now, I use myself as an example. Like the thing about structure is that it explains a great deal about the shape, the overall shape of the world. It explains, for instance, how it is that we live in a society that is no longer overtly, mostly, there certainly still exists, kind of subcultures, but a society that is no longer overtly racist. Like you can't seriously hope to become president of the United States by coming out with by saying I'm a white supremacist. Although some candidates get a little close sometimes. You can't do that, right? And so nobody's racist, right? But the world, particularly America, is profoundly shaped in unequal ways by race, by gender, by class. So structure is all the stuff that, structure isn't really touchable by individuals. You can't change your structure. You can only work with your agency a little bit, here and there to really do the best you can. Now, I'm a really good example of the positive side of structure. I'm a white male who speaks the dominant dialect, and all I had to do to succeed in life, honestly, I don't want to diss myself. I worked very hard, but all I had to do was work hard. It was just, hit the ground and run. And by God, the blessings flowed, It ain't that easy for everybody due to structural factors. But that's not to say I don't want to dismiss the power, the work of agency, your own creativity and energy and will, no matter who you are, because it all does matter and it all ought to be honored. You can use your independent agency to establish your own values for instance, distinct from your parents' values and so forth. Aim yourself toward a specific life outcome, exert your energy for goals and community you cherish, and so forth. Two more terms that are oftentimes sort of brought up in opposition to each other: nurture and nature. Okay? These are not parallel terms, by the way. The structure agency thing and the nature nurture thing are not oftentimes sort of intermingled. They're just different tools. So nurture is everything. You've heard the term nature or nurture, I presume. So nurture, when we talk about nurture, we're talking about the fact that you were born into a specific environmental and familial context that shaped you, right? So this is about influence, direct influence on your values and so forth. Your nurturing by family and society has influenced you to embrace certain values and ideas about what it means to act and behave appropriately, usually in terms of being a person with a certain ascribed gender, sexuality, class, culture, and set of norms, etc., set of cultural norms, etc. So that's, ideas, values, notions you have in your head about what it means to be this kind of person. Then there is nature. right? Which is the fact that you were born with a specific biological, genetic, and bodily heritage. You were born with a body into the biological body of the natural world, without which your body would have no being or sustenance. Your body is a specific body with its own genetic predispositions. We are, by the way, living in a fascinating time in academic history when scientists are really finding that the body exerts, like the genetic predisposition, exerts influences that we just didn't really see along, for a lot of history. Your body has its own ideas about what you are and what you need. It just has its own way with you sometimes. Oh, and nature bats last, by the way. You, like all life around you, like the earth itself, you were born and you will die. Sorry about that. I say that because I think that's a preoccupation of apocalyptic narratives. They are interested in mortality, the reality of mortality. My story that I told you was a confrontation with my own mortality. When you get to these extreme places, which is what apocalyptic narratives take you to, you cannot not confront your own mortality. So, 2 terms: structure, agency, nature, and nurture. Here's your assignment. Okay, as you go forth, I think that all your professors will corroborate that this is a good assignment. I could be wrong. They could feel free to modify, guys. But as you read into the forest, look for how Jean Hegland, as a specific writer, answers these key questions, thereby making her own argument about what in human identity matters. As the structure of civilization collapses around Eva and Nell, what is it that's collapsing? Yes? Oh, it's already up. Yes, it's already up. If it's not, I can do it right after. I'm not sure if I did. I'm pretty sure that I did. Okay, so what is it that collapses, right? What is this? Okay, society's crashing. What's crashing? What parts of their identities inside collapse as society collapses? Second, how do Eva and Nell exert agency within their civilization and after their civilization recedes, collapses? Where do they go? Where do they find give within the givens around them? How can they make a difference in their own lives for themselves? How does their familial and social nurturing support and or impede them as they shift to a new way of living? So like their parents raised them to be certain kinds of people. How was that good for them and not good for them? And finally, how does their relationship with nature, both their own bodily nature and the nature of the forest, change during the course of the novel? And going back to our original question, as civilization collapses and the sisters have to turn more and more to the forest, metaphorically and literally, what is left in their identities? Okay? Do they find something really, 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 really real? And that's the central philosophical question of the book, I think. I'm going to go back to this guy. But before we do that, it's time for you now to, if you have a question, write it on the card and pass it down to the side. So Shannon, and who else was going to help? Hallie? Shannon and Hallie are going to collect those. Just do that real fast. I have a few more final things to say. I'm only giving you 1 minute, though. Not all of you have to write a question, by the way. Don't strain. All right, that's good. Looks like we've got some good questions. You can keep them coming. Pass them down. Let's bring down the conversation, though. I'm a Girl Scout, so I can do this. Y'all know this? Any Girl Scouts? All right, that's it. Shh. Okay, so what I want to tell you about, I'm just giving you the what's the word? The punchline, I guess, to my own experience. What did I get? So I'm going to tell you a couple of stories that will illuminate, my own answers to these questions. They are about when I was done. Okay, so the first story I want to tell you is just about what happened when I walked out of the woods, out of the forest. Literally, it was out of the forest onto a road. There was a road, and there was a huge SUV going by. Like it just went on and on and on. And there was a little boy in the back seat, like 8 years old or something. He was fiddling away with his Nintendo, not paying any attention to the wilderness. Now, I wasn't, so the interesting thing to me about this is I wasn't like judgmental about this kid at all. My response, here's what my response was. It was just simply, oh, yeah, there's all that. Do you kind of get that? Oh, yeah, there's all that. It was like my little moment of like, oh, yeah, there's all that human stuff, that human civilization. Why don't you keep that image of the Nintendo game like in your head for a second. The other story was a little bit later. The next day, or was it the same day? No, next day. I drove down out of the wilderness, and I got hopelessly lost in Modesto. I couldn't deal with the streets. And I turned on the radio just to see what was going on. I had to rapidly turn it off because I just couldn't deal with the chatter. This like onslaught, particularly of words. Bear in mind, I had hardly talked to anybody for 5 days. I'd hardly even heard my own voice for 5 days, and suddenly there was this avalanche of words coming at me, and it felt incredibly oppressive. This guy right here, I don't know, he looks totally hot, I know. But in addition to that, to me, he looks really haunted. That guy wants nothing more in that picture than to put that backpack back on and get the hell out of Dodge. Go back to the wilderness. And when I was climbing up McGee Pass at the very beginning, all I wanted was to go back home and put all that shit on eBay. So I tell you that to give you a sense of the change that is possible when you have a confrontation with the forest. Okay? And what I want to and to indicate to you that real things can happen when you contact a part of you that is in touch beyond the social stuff that's around you. Okay? So here's your assignment part 2. What is your relationship with what I call your own wilderness self? I'm telling you that I think that society, I'm very philosophically romantic about this, okay? So your professors can help you understand that. That there is something that you contact when society recedes, okay? So what is your own relationship with your own wilderness self, the part of you that is in touch with your own capabilities? I really learned that I can carry 60 pounds over a 12,000-foot pass, on my experience. What part of you, the part of you that is in touch with the beauty of the natural world and your own beauty as part of it, that knows that you too are a wild and free animal gracing the earth. So one of the things that happens when you climb up to that country that high is there are bears, and bears can eat you. Now, awful things can happen to you down here in civilization, but it's pretty rare that a bear would eat you, and it's extremely rare that a bear eats anybody anyway. But it's actually kind of like realistically possible that a bear could really mess you up, which means that you suddenly are not the top of the food chain anymore. You are just like those other animals that exist out there, which at first you're like, ugh, I'm not special. Ugh. But then the next thing you say is, well, that maybe means that maybe I'm just as beautiful as that bear and have just as much right to be here in this landscape as that bear. You get behind yourself, okay? But the part of you that's aware that civilization is in many ways arbitrary and fleeting and silly, like a Nintendo game. Not that there's anything wrong with Nintendo or any of the games that you guys like to play. I don't play many games. I'm not trying to diss that. But to what extent is society, civilization, like just this thing we play that is not necessary, it's arbitrary, and it isn't permanent like granite is? That's what I'm referring to. The part of you that's aware of just how much you need other people. I told you how lonely I was on my experience. I absolutely realized without any doubt at all that I'm deeply, deeply, deeply social, even though I'm an extremely introvert as well. I'm very introverted, but I need people like nothing else. And that's why this guy is determined not to put on that backpack and go back out into the wilderness. I need to be back down here where the people are. That's where I belong. Okay, so you need other people in the natural world around you in order to grow, thrive, and be fully you. To close out, I have a poem for you. This is Mary Oliver's The Summer Day, and it's a challenge to you. Notice that she begins with an interaction with nature and goes from there to feel the implication of that interaction with nature on her own identity and her own destiny. Who made the world? Eternal question, right? Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, this one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who's eating sugar out of my hand, who's moving her jaws back and forth instead of up or down. This is that heightened gaze. Sorry to interrupt, but I just want to do a little explication. That heightened gaze you can have when you're out there having these experiences. Now she snaps her wing. Okay, now she lifts her pale forearm. No, excuse me. Who's gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Did you know that grasshoppers wash their faces? Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down into the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Thank you. Fire away.
All right, so we have some questions from you guys to ask Scott. The first one is, what answers did you find after your...
Did that help? Here's an extension.
Stop shifting, everybody.
What's that?
I'm just letting everyone stop shifting.
Oh, thanks, Don. Yeah, shut up. Oh, just briefly, everybody take out a sheet of paper. This is by the by. And just flap the page of your notebook a little bit. Just do that. See how loud that rapidly gets when you start, closing up your notebooks? Just, again, this is by the by, just doing lecture etiquette. When it's just me, I'm okay with you guys. But when we have a guest, please be on your best behavior. We go up until 10 minutes till. Sometimes the lecture will blow it and go a couple minutes after. Just please hang in with it. Leave quietly if you have to. But don't start packing up until you absolutely get the word. I promise you that if they go too late, I will stand up and stop them, okay? Anyway, back to the question. So, I got a lot of stuff. Certainly I got all those things, a connection with my wilderness self. But here's the other thing. That 10 days in the wilderness, 5 days alone, has continued to shape every day that I've lived ever since then. Like that was so profoundly shaping of my values. That's where I'll leave it. Go ahead.
Does an existential crisis need to occur in order to identify who you really are?
That's a great question for your sections, isn't it? Like, do you need to have one of these hard, age 39 moments? Does anybody? Do you guys think it's necessary? Anybody want to put forward? You say no. You think so? No, not necessarily. Yes. Okay. Did anybody want to offer something on that? Yeah, please.
I'd say I agree with it. I think you do, because you never truly know who you are, what you're capable of, until you're pushed to your absolute limits.
That was what was behind my adventure. Definitely, I was like, who the hell am I now at age 39? I want to push myself. I want to have a crisis. Like, I literally pushed myself into this crisis in a lot of ways. And, it was a royal road to learning, to self-knowledge, no question. I don't know. I guess I'll take it off your shoulders. I don't think it's, necessary. I think just being regularly attentive to life and to being open to continuing to learn is you're on the road. That's fine. I would say that the crises are the moments when we have the big, steep learning curves about it. That's what I would say.
Is it fair to say your roles in society and civic duties make up the parts of you that are really real?
That's the great question. Please carry that back to your sections. So what did it say? Civic duties?
Is it fair to say your roles in society and your civic duties make up the parts of you?
It's hard for me not to address that question very personally, you know. Later on in the term, we'll have Dr. Boaz teaching us about the democratic self, like the civic self, the self that you exert when you vote, you know, or the self that you exert when you take a position in a public debate. And I, for one, absolutely cherish that identity. I vote every time I can. I keep in touch, you know, with issues and you know, support my candidates, and you know, I go ad nauseum on Facebook with my friends about all this kind of stuff. I would never, ever, ever personally want to dismiss. This is just me, okay, by the way. I would never want to dismiss those parts of me, like the voter, even the consumer, because I need my stuff, my food and stuff. You know, I don't want to hate any part of me, you know? But, like, trying to think, compared with Daddy, for me anyway, those other parts are in service of Daddy.
This is a two-part question. Did your experience in the wild change your view of modern civilization in any way? And with enough work, can we change or leave behind our structure society has put onto us?
Again, great question for the second one. Great question for your sections. Read the first part again, just so I have it right.
Did your experience in the wild change your view of modern civilization in any way?
Well, like that picture of that guy, you know. Where the hell am I here? Sorry. Oh, forget it. The picture of me, right? At that point, when all I wanted to do was put on that backpack and go back into the wilderness, I've heard other people say exactly the same thing. So do any of you know the Into the Wild story? The guy, Chris McCandless, who went into, I see a lot of nodding, the guy who disappeared into the Alaska wilderness and unfortunately died of starvation. A movie was made. Do you know this? So people will do this, you know, they will like just disappear. There are people down, you know, I could name several other people who just can't deal. Once they have a taste of this wilderness self, they can't go back to the civilized self. I know that. I really, really know that. I guess the biggest thing for me is that Nintendo metaphor thing, where I definitely have a sense of civilization is not essential, as kind of arbitrary, as sort of a game that we play with each other, as a preoccupation, as not something that lasts, you know, that necessarily will endure, that it will change. It's a human construct. It's not, you know, basically way down deep at the bottom of everything. Do I think it's inherently corrupt? Like corrupting, like some romantic philosophers do, that like Thoreau, he just, you know, he would say that I want to know, we're almost done. One more comment. That, you know, that civilization is inherently corrupting. It ruins you and it ruins people. Do I think that to a certain extent? Yeah. Do I think that it can also save people? It can also give you answers? Yeah. That sounds like a good place to end. Thank you very much.